Thor, a company listed on AIM and ASX. Primary listing is AIM, and we probably 80% of our shares trade on AIM. Major shareholders: Metal Tiger, a London-listed investment company, and then an individual and the directors picking up about 10% additional between them. Our focus primarily, but not exclusively, is tungsten. Tungsten, for those who don't know, is a strategic commodity. It's classified as a strategic metal by the US Department of the Interior. It's a commodity it's a metal that is substantially supplied. I think 75% of the world's tungsten production is out of China. There is zero primary production of tungsten in the USA. We have some molybdenum. Price of moly is give or take a bit the same as the price of tungsten, and we have some copper, and later on it'll become apparent the relative price or the value of the metals between copper, tungsten and moly. 0.25% tungsten, 0.25% moly, about as valuable as 1% copper, and that might be of interest as we look at this going forward. Our flagship project, Molyhil, is tungsten and molybdenum project in the Northern Territory of Australia, right in the heart of our wide brown land. Just over 12 months ago, we produced a definitive feasibility study on this project that said it was well and truly worth doing. Prices have changed a little bit, and exchange rates have gone down. Prices have come down a little bit, so the payback and the EBITDA maybe have suffered a touch, but not too much. Finance requirement still $43 million. Payback probably now about 2 years compared with the 18 months at the time. Importantly, the OPEX at Molyhil is $90 an MTU, or for those who don't work with MTUs, about $9 a kilo. That compares with the current price for scheelite concentrates or tungsten concentrates at the moment of about $18. So that gives a reasonable margin going forward over the 7-year life of the open pit mine at Molyhil, and then on after that for the satellite deposits and the underground operation that will follow. The resource and the reserves at Molyhil here on this table: 4.7 million tonnes, about 0.28% tungsten trioxide, which is what is in the WO3 is what carries that value of about $23,000 a tonne. Doesn't sound like a very high grade. Just remember, this is about 4 times the price of copper. For every tonne of tungsten we produce, we'll produce half a tonne of moly, and again, moly is about 4 times the price of copper. There is a little bit of copper that comes along with this, not enough to make it a project in its own right, but a very handy little byproduct credit as well. We have to get our feasibility, we had to produce an independent open cut ore reserve statement, a little in front of doing the reserve, and that says that about 75 to 80% of the resource translate to the reserve at maybe a slightly higher grade of tungsten, and the recent upgrade to the resource estimate improved the value of the of the moly a little bit, and that is not yet reflected in that higher grade resource, or it's not reflected in the reserve or the improvement or any improvement in the feasibility study. At the end of the life of the open pit, there is an underground mine in the wings. The red stuff right down the bottom of this cross section of the pit shell is material that is mineralised, as we have had tungsten and moly intersections there, but not sufficient density to bring into the resource. Above that, but below the pit shell, is 1 million tonnes of material that our reserve engineer says is more than profitable for underground mining at the end of the open pit life. Excitingly for us, on this relatively convoluted map, 30 kilometres from Molyhil is a whole bunch of red dots there that represent outcropping tungsten deposits in an area we call Bonya. We secured, after a lot of effort over a long period, 40% equity in the Bonya tenements about this time last year. We inherited a small copper deposit, which is very nice because that will go through our plant at Molyhil seamlessly. But we commenced, we did our first drilling program on these deposits in April of this year, and on 2 of those we had some very tidy and quite high-grade tungsten intersections and a little bit of copper in one of them as well. We're back right now doing the second drilling program, and out of that we expect some resources to flow, and we would expect that a resource estimate on these 2 deposits roughly around the end of this calendar year, maybe the first couple of weeks in January. That is what will take Molyhil as an open pit operation from 7 years through to 10, followed by an extra 2 or 3 years of underground mining at Molyhil. Staying with tungsten, but moving across the Pacific to your great state of Nevada. At Pilot Mountain, on the road between Reno and Vegas, is our second tungsten deposit, and in a country that has no domestic tungsten production, where 75% of the world's tungsten is produced from China, and we have the largest tungsten resource in the USA by quite some margin. It's not the largest deposit in, not the largest resource in North America. There are a couple of monsters in Canada that are very, very, very low grade and very, very high cost to bring into production. This is still, by global standards, a significant deposit, and this is something that, as a critical commodity, we believe should be of interest to the US as a strategic commodity and also for US investors. At Pilot Mountain, we have conducted we've produced a scoping level study that says this is worth doing. We have 4 deposits of tungsten, all within a couple of kilometres of one another, that have poked their nose through volcanic cover. We have resources on 2 of those, and they are desert scheelite and garnet, if you can read the map from that distance. Gunmetal, the other one to the west, Union Carbide had a reserve on that in to their standard in 1976 on a study done for them by Kaiser engineers. What is additionally interesting about this one is that each of these deposits have poked their nose through volcanic cover. There has been no work done to see if there are other deposits that didn't quite manage to emerge from underneath that cover. And there lies a very, very interesting opportunity at some point. Compared with Molyhil, Pilot Mountain is some years away from development. Molyhil, by comparison, if we could, from the time we get that $43 million we're out there trying to chase right now, there's a 12-month lead time for the first production. This one's probably 3 or 4 years from being at that stage. Moving along, because time is of the essence with these talks, back in Australia, we also are in the copper business. Just north of Adelaide, where I happen to live, are 2 historic copper deposits where in the late 1800s and early 1900s people were mining very, very high grade copper. They left behind a halo of lower grade material, and some of that lower grade material is in geological scenario that is suitable for in situ leach mining or solution mining. For those of you who want to know more about that, Excelsior Mining are back here at 2 o'clock talking about their project in Arizona, which is advancing copper production in exactly this manner. We have resources on these projects. Importantly, as we go through feasibility and of this project, we've got a grant from the Australian government for almost 3 million Aussie dollars that, along with the money we are putting in, we believe should substantially cover the feasibility work on the Kapunda deposit, which is the most advanced of the 2. I won't talk too much about solution mining, other than to say that 50% of the world's uranium is produced via this method. A reasonable amount of the world's potash is produced via this method. In South Australia, where these deposits are, there have been several solution mining operations producing uranium, and the people working on this team are included in the people that have in the past worked at those in situ leaching uranium mines in South Australia. We have a resource estimate at Kapunda of just under 120,000 tonnes of contained copper. Grade's quite low, but with solution mining, low grade is not a problem. It is a very, very cheap way to produce metal. You don't have to dig a hole in the ground. You don't have to do a waste dump. You don't have to build a tailings disposal facility. You don't need crushers. You don't need ball mills or flotation cells. You dissolve the metal under the ground with what is called a lixiviant through a series of boreholes. You pump up the dissolved metal out of the ground, and after that it's standard recovery technique as you would use, for example, in a heap leach operation. A very elegant way to do it if the geological conditions allow you to do so, and that is what we have at Kapunda. Also at Kapunda, while we don't have a resource for that, about 1/3 of the holes drilled at Kapunda historically also assayed for gold. Now, we have been able to demonstrate using the product that dissolves the copper in Australia that we can also dissolve the gold, and that is a very interesting upside. And some drilling, a couple of drill holes scheduled in the next couple of months. We will be assaying for gold, hoping to fine-tune the gold story so that we can produce both copper and gold at the same time at very low cost. Nearby at Moonta, probably 70 miles away, we have about 10 copper deposits in a row that we believe are also suitable for this sort of extraction. We have a resource estimate on 3 of those, totaling about 114,000 tonnes of contained copper. If the other 6 or 7 mature, there is some drilling in those, not enough to have them classified as resources. If they mature as we expect and hope they would, we think there's probably 750,000 tonnes of copper in the system there around Moonta, and that's then becomes a very significant copper operation for our little company. Kapunda going forward, we're scheduling some field recovery trials, and after that, and some more evaluation, most of which is funded by the Australian government, and we're going through feasibility work. At Moonta, we've got to update the resource estimate, a little bit more drilling, a little bit behind Kapunda. First production at Kapunda possibly around 2 years from now. So you could imagine that in 12 or 18 months we could have production of tungsten and molybdenum at Molyhil, and then within a year or so of that, production of copper at Kapunda, and maybe 4 or 5 years after that, production of scheelite or tungsten concentrates out of the Pilot Mountain project in Nevada. I think that's as much time as I have. Thank you very much for your time.